Week 10 Sunday NFL preview, everything you need to know in 15 minutes. If you've never been here before, welcome. My name is Max. I make these for every game on Sunday as well as every primetime game to give you a unique edge looking at run scheme metrics, coverage data, and overall trends nobody talks about because it relates to the scheme behind the game of football instead of just the numbers you see on the screen. Without further ado, let's get into this breakdown. As always, in the description are links to my socials. There are plenty more breakdowns on there. And if you are new, make sure you subscribe. Let's talk Atlanta, Indianapolis first. By the time I'm recording this, officially, DeForest Buckner put on IR, so not playing in this game, but not playing for the next 4 weeks as well. Indianapolis has been really good on the ground with DeForest Buckner. Does that change? We wait to see, but they still are allowing 264 pass yards per game. The main guy I'm looking at specifically in the pass game is actually Kyle Pitts. They're allowing 6.7 receptions per game to opposing tight ends, as well as 74.9 yards per game to opposing tight ends. They're also targeted in the slot where Kyle Pitts runs a bunch of his routes from at a top 10 rate, and Penix is throwing to the slot at a top 3 rate. The addition of Sauce Gardner, to me, is going to force Penix to keep the ball between the hashes a little bit more, which already is where the Colts are targeted. But the most important thing here is how the defense changes with the addition of Sauce Gardner and really just the departure of DeForest Buckner. I think Atlanta can have some more success on the ground. And right now, Indy's a touchdown favorite here, guys. I think this is a close game. In London, you don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like. I think this could be a pretty close game, but it is pretty important to note the Colts have allowed a tight end to score in 4 straight weeks. On the other side, Atlanta is allowing 124.4 rush yards per game, as well as 4.38 yards per carry. The interesting thing is, you look at those numbers and you're like, wow, people are running the ball really well in the Atlanta Falcons. There hasn't been a ton of single game success against this Falcons defense. When you go look at it, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you can find a 129-yard performance from Christian McCaffrey, 200 total yards in that Sunday night football game where he touched the ball, 31 times? That's insane, right? But go look at the other games. I know the Patriots didn't have Ramondre, who is their RB1. Travion Henderson had 55 yards. Devon Achane had 67 yards. Ollie Gordon had 46 as well, but even James Cook not touching 100. Chuba Hubbard, when Dowdle wasn't playing a ton, had 73. There's not a ton of individual success against the Atlanta Falcons, which potentially is the most important thing to note about this matchup, as well as Daniel Jones throwing out wide at a top 10 rate. It's really interesting to look at the Colts production, right? We go back to this Indianapolis Colts game log. You go look at the Colts production against teams that have allowed more targets out wide. The big one for me is the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2 115-yard performances or even 200-plus yard performances from teammates. I don't really think is going to happen very often, or dare I say again. But you can also go look at some of these other teams, like the Denver Broncos, 8 across the 2 outside guys for 100-plus yards. Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce also combining for 130-plus against Tennessee. In the other game against Tennessee, you got a 95-yard receiver as well as 2 catches for 69 yards for Alec Pierce. Daniel Jones loves to get the ball out wide when there are opportunities to do so. Atlanta's a more balanced team in terms of what they do defensively, so there will be some opportunities out wide. That is likely where Daniel Jones will go with the football. I do think Indy wins this game, but I think Atlanta keeps this close. Looking at New Orleans, Carolina, this is the worst game I had to break down, to be honest with you guys. Not a ton of great information here, but New Orleans allowing 2 pass touchdowns a game, 2 full pass touchdowns a game, and they're targeted out wide at a top 5 rate. That is Tet McMillan. That has Tet McMillan written all over it. New Orleans is actually good on the ground in terms of efficiency, but teams are still averaging 129.4 rush yards per game against them. Teams are running the ball so much that they're having overall success, but in terms of efficiency, the Saints are really not that bad on the ground. So I don't expect some crazy game on the ground, even though Rico Dowdle's been playing really, really well. He's banged up. We don't know how much he's going to play. I am really fascinated to see what the Panthers do in the pass game, because I think the Saints are going to force them into some situations where they're going to have to throw the ball more than we expect. On the other side, you'd think Olave would be better with the departure of Shaheed, but the reality is Carolina's been pretty good against receivers. 5 receiving touchdowns allowed to the position. I believe bottom 7 in fantasy points per game allowed. So a holistic overview against those receivers. It's not great. It's really, really not great, especially when you look at, the game flow potentially in this game. I think this is going to be a closer game. I think New Orleans can throw some punches against Carolina. I don't think this is a pushover. I'd be dumb to pick against Carolina with the way that they're playing right now, but I do not think this game is a pushover by any means. By any means. Giants versus Bears. Both teams are really bad in terms of pass yards per game allowed. The Giants are worse in rush yards per game allowed, but they're both really bad. The bottom line here, these defenses are really bad. The Giants play a ton of man, which should feed into Rome Odunze. The Bears play a ton of zone, which should feed into Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson. But the most important thing is the rush game, right? Giants are allowing 150 rush yards per game allowed, second to only Cincinnati. So you look at Kyle Monangai last week against Cincinnati, 26 for 176. He was great. 13 for 81 against New Orleans a couple weeks back. But DeAndre Swift, when I'm recording this, full participant in practice, he's going to play. How much does he play? How many touches does he take away? I don't know. Like, nobody really knows unless you're in the Bears building. But DeAndre Swift, I do want to remind you guys, prior to that game against Baltimore when the run defense was pretty good, like Monangai and Swift had no success. Back-to-back 100-yard games, 7.7 yards per carry against a Washington defense that's also not great on the ground, 6.5 against New Orleans defense we just talked about, holistically not great, but efficiency-wise not bad. Swift had been the guy. Swift was the guy. Again, it's a Ben Johnson offense. There's going to be packages for both of them. That's what this is. But I do really like both of them. I don't want us to discount DeAndre Swift's talent and the impact he can have, though. Jacksonville versus Houston. The big thing here is the Jaguars' wide receiver distribution, but a couple other notes. Davis Mills is playing quarterback. The Jags are allowing almost 260 pass yards per game, but only 86.9 rush yards per game. Basically, they're going to force you to throw the football with the way they align. They play a bunch of cover 3 and a bunch of cover 4. They make it hard to run on you. And, when they pass, it's a pretty solid unit, but a unit that can be taken advantage of. Houston's the number 1 defense. They're only allowing 90 rush yards per game. Very similar thing where they will make it extremely difficult to pass on you, make you to pass. And then when teams pass against them, they got Derek Stingley. They got some DB depth. It's even harder to do so. So I'm looking at this game and I'm thinking probably another pretty low scoring game. Brian Thomas Jr. is banged up. We wait to see if he's going to play or not. But here's the bottom line for the Jaguars wide receiver distribution. Parker Washington is the slot guy. We've said that. We've seen reports. It's a lot easier to learn the boundary positions, less motions, I'm sure, with Jacoby Myers at the receiver position instead of Parker Washington. Now, I still think everybody's healthy. Jacoby Myers can step in the slot a little bit, but the Houston Texans are comparatively targeted in the slot a little bit more than out wide. There's not a big difference comparatively, a little bit more. But the reality is Trevor Lawrence was already throwing out wide at a top 5 rate. Jacoby Myers probably will get the Derek Stingley shadow. You go back and forth. I feel more confident with Parker Washington than I do with Jacoby Myers, especially because he's new to the offense. But the bottom line is the past data says Trevor Lawrence should throw the ball at a higher clip outside than inside. And that will likely mean Jacoby Myers. Does he have success? I'm not convinced. How many snaps is he going to play? We got no idea. So I would more confidently lean towards Parker Washington. Buffalo, Miami. In this game, I do think Houston takes care of business at home again. Also, Chicago Giants. I do think Chicago wins this game. Buffalo, Miami. The guy I'm looking at mainly is Devon Achane. The Bills are allowing 141.4 rush yards per game. Ed Oliver's hurt, and they're giving up 5.36 yards per carry. It's the second most in the NFL. Last game against the Buffalo Bills, he had 9 targets. I believe 7 receptions, but 9 targets. And 2 is already thrown at the running back position at a top 5 rate. The Bills play a bunch of zone. They're going to sit back and make you check the football down. Ollie Gordon's banged up as well. Now, I look at this Bills defense as a unit that steps up in the biggest games, but not rolls over in the games that are mean less or are less important on the schedule, but don't play as well in some of these games. And I look at Miami's ability to run the ball with Devon Achane, despite not having a great offensive line, despite not having a lot of weapons to respect on the outside. And I'm kind of impressed. I'm kind of impressed in terms of efficiency. They get away from it a little bit, but I still think Devon Achane can have a big one in this one. On the other side of the ball, Miami's allowing 145.6 rush yards per game. They scared us a little bit when they shut Bijan down, but then Derrick Henry last week ran right through them. Miami is also off a mini bye, which is worth noting, but they're targeted at the inline tight end spot at the highest rate in the league. They're really bad against tight ends. Let's go look at some of these performances, guys. If you were watching last week, which again, if you're not subscribed, you're missing out on some of this stuff. You have nowhere on Mark Andrews. Had to have a big game. He scored twice, right? Charlie Kolar even got in the end zone, 3 combined touchdowns. The game before that, Kyle Pitts catches all 9 of his targets for 60 yards. Harold Fannin Jr., nothing super crazy. But again, David Njoku in this game did not play, and it was pouring rain. Really bad weather. They barely threw the ball. I don't even think Dylan Gabriel had like 100 yards. Oronde Gadsden, 7 for 68. This is the only one where I'm like, all right, no production, but Mitchell Evans caught a 4-yard touchdown, and the Panthers really don't have tight ends they throw to. Mason Taylor, 5 for 65. Dalton Kincaid, 5 for 66 and a touchdown. Jackson Hawes, you guys know, the real ones know when they played. Jackson Hawes scored a touchdown. 3 for 38 for Austin Hooper, and then 7 for 76 for Tyler Warren. Like, the bottom line here is tight ends have a lot of success against Miami, and it's pretty consistent. So Dalton Kincaid, a Dawson Knox, again, a Jackson Hawes, a little sprinkle there. Why not? Why not? Baltimore versus Minnesota. The Ravens, again, identity has changed defensively with Alohi Gilman. They're a little more balanced. They're playing a little more zone, more middle field open, but they're still being targeted out wide, not at the highest rate, at a high rate, at a very high rate. Now, I look at the Minnesota Vikings and what J.J. McCarthy wants to do. Holistically, the Vikings are already throwing the ball out wide a bunch. So guys like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison should have some pretty heavy workload in this game, especially if Baltimore is going to stop up the run. Aaron Jones is banged up. I think they lean away from the run a little bit if he's not fully healthy, or dare I say doesn't even play. On the other side of the ball, this is where I'm most excited. Also going back up, I think Buffalo wins this game on the road. But this is where I'm going back. This is where I'm most excited, because Minnesota structurally, and again, they throw changeups at Lamar all the time, but structurally, when stuff hits the wall, what do they go back to? It's their middle field open stuff, just like Miami from last week, just like Miami when the Ravens saw them. So Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, the running back receiving production we talked about a little bit as well. This is going to be a closer game, though. So I think Lamar should have to throw the ball a little bit more. And Minnesota is targeted in the slot at a top 10 rate. It's super important to note that. Now, you go look at Mark Andrews in the past production. He got in the end zone twice against Miami, and then these 4 games were the talking points with Lamar Jackson. The Houston, Rams, and Bears games, Lamar did not play. He started out with a catch in each of the first 2 games, and you're like, what is the issue with Mark Andrews? And then all of a sudden, he has a good game against Detroit, gets in the end zone, has a good game against Kansas City. Not great with Cooper Rush and Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Shocker, he's not going to be great with those guys at quarterback. And then he scores twice against Miami. But I'm far more interested in Isaiah Likely and Zay Flowers because of the athletic ability they provide and can challenge this Minnesota defense with. This is a really tough one. Call me crazy. I think Minnesota shocks Baltimore and wins this one at home. Cleveland versus the Jets. Quinshon Judkins has a great matchup. No, not on the injury report. Jets are allowing 135.8 rush yards per game and are bottom 10 in yards per carry allowed. They're also bottom 5 in yards after contact. They can't really tackle. They don't have Quinnen Williams. Quincy Williams has been benched. Sauce Gardner's not there anymore. This defense is not the same unit it was, especially on the ground, in my opinion. So I think Judkins can have a ton of success there. You go look at some of his game logs. Every time the game has been, within reach, moderately close, even for like 3 quarters of the game. Like this Detroit game was not, that score does not reflect how close it was the first 3 quarters of the game. 94 yards against Green Bay, 82 against Detroit. Minnesota, really close game, 110. Pittsburgh, you start to lose it and they sell out to stop the run, 36 yards, right? Okay, so be it. Miami, close game / you're winning. He scores 3 times, has a solid game, touches the ball 25 times. New England, you're getting blown out. You get away from the run. If you believe this Cleveland Browns team can keep it close with Jets, which I do, I really like Quinshon Judkins to have a big game. I think he can rip off some explosives. I think he can just get in the end zone. This is a really nice spot for him. On the other side of the ball, Garrett Wilson's back, and the Browns are targeted out wide at a top 3 rate. Look, the Browns, Denzel Ward doesn't tend to follow as much, right? The Browns have trust in Tyson Campbell, but I think if the Browns have the opportunity to travel Ward with Garrett Wilson, they will. A.D. Mitchell's playing for the Jets again. That is a guy who I'm looking at to potentially have an explosive against a Tyson Campbell, but I still think the Browns win this game, a lower scoring game. I think they take care of business. New England, Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is allowing 253.1 pass yards per game. They're targeted out wide at a top 10 rate, and there's no Kayshon Boutte. So what happens now? The question becomes who steps up on the outside. I think likely Stephon Diggs slides outside. Pop Douglas comes back into the slot and plays a little bit more in there. But the 2 most important guys here are Mac Hollins and Kyle Williams. You can see Mac Hollins is the number, actually, in terms of snap count, number 1 receiver, but playing as much as a Kayshon Boutte or as much as a Stephon Diggs. But the big bump in terms of how much the snap count increased was Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams at 31% last week, 31 snaps, 46%. The Patriots love to rotate their receivers. They trust the 4-5 guys they occasionally have out there. That was Kyle Williams' highest snap count of the year by double. They very clearly wanted him on the field in those pass-heavy scenarios. However, it is also really important to note that it was a blowout. As the game went on, Kyle Williams played a little bit more. Some of these other guys were not playing. So I still think Mac Hollins is the main guy you lead into. Tampa's balanced in terms of what they do defensively. They're good on the ground, much like New England. They're only allowing 75.4 rush yards per game. It's the best in the NFL. This is already going to be a pass fest for Tampa. No Bucky Irving. Baker's also throwing out wide at a top 5 rate, which to me screams Emeka Egbuka. He will probably get the Christian Gonzalez shadow. Do what you will with that information. To me, this is a weird game where like a couple games this year, you walk in and you're like, wow, Tampa has no business being in this game or winning this game, but they find a way to do it because they have Baker Mayfield. I think this is exactly that type of game. I trust Tampa off a bye to get it done. Arizona versus Seattle. Both teams are bottom 10 in tight end receptions allowed. So Trey McBride, AJ Barner, even Elijah Arroyo, good guys to look at. And you remember the Elijah Arroyo pass interference in the end zone. We were all over him to potentially score in that game last time they played. But the most important thing here is the change with Jacoby Brissett. The games with Brissett, there's a pretty heavy increase in out wide target rate, which means Marvin Harrison Jr. is the guy to be looking at. And on the other side of the ball, on the other aspect of the defensive side of the ball, Seattle's only allowing 85.9 rush yards per game. I mean, Arizona's already really banged up at the running back position. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a bunch. Sam Darnold's throwing out wide at a top 3 rate, in line at a top 5 rate. But my question is, does that change with Rashid Shaheed? I think it does. I think he leans into the slot a little bit more, but the Kubiak offense is not going to change, which is my main thing. So again, JSN was supposed to have this great matchup against Arizona a few weeks ago, kind of bailed everybody out who was on him with a late catch. The main guys to me to look at in this game are Marvin Harrison Jr. on the Arizona side and Rashid Shaheed on the other side. I'm fascinated to see what Rashid Shaheed does from the slot where Arizona is being targeted more heavily against a defense that's playing better. Like Walter Nolan is playing really well. Their secondary is getting healthier. It's not fully healthy yet, but healthier. I'm fascinated to see this game. And I genuinely think Arizona could steal this one. I do. I think there's a world where Arizona, because of how well they're playing, sneaks away with this one. Going back up and giving my prediction, Tampa Bay, I'm just going to say it. I think Arizona wins this game. I think they're playing that well. I think that defense is that good. It's a divisional game. Anything can happen. I know Seattle's playing great football, but I'm going to pick Arizona. Rams versus San Francisco, another game that was tough to break down, but San Francisco has allowed 15 pass touchdowns, top 10 allowed, while only forcing 1 interception, which is kind of crazy. Both teams are targeted in the slot at top 5 rates. Mac Jones is throwing to the running back position at a top 5 rate. Purdy, questionable status in the air, as always. I'm not picking against Matt Stafford right now. Even without Puka Nacua, they're playing too well. They're playing way, way too well on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, they're getting after the quarterback. I still go back to that game a few weeks ago on Thursday night. I still think the Rams were the better team. I still think they'll find an edge. I find it really hard to believe that Sean McVay will also lose to Kyle Shanahan twice in the same season. So I'm backing the Rams in this one, even on the road. Detroit versus the Chargers. Jared Goff off a loss is a different beast. That's the bottom line here. Oh, sorry, this should not be Chargers. This is Washington. Excuse me. Detroit versus the Commanders. Jared Goff is a different beast off a loss. Washington allowing almost 270 pass yards per game, 2+ pass touchdowns per game, third highest passer rating, and the highest yards per attempt. So again, in a game where it could be a blowout, right, the yards per attempt makes me believe that Jared Goff, even if he throws the ball a little bit less, will still have some yardage production. Goff off a loss, 265+ yards per game, nearly a 4-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, and almost 2 full touchdowns per game. Commanders do not have Marshawn Lattimore, but this is the most fun stat. This is not advice. None of this is professional or financial advice. 2 of Jared Goff's 5 touchdown pass games, meaning he's thrown 5 touchdowns in 3 games, have come off a loss. It's a bad secondary, a secondary that's really struggling. I think Detroit, I joked about it last night with my friends at dinner. I think Detroit could actually score 60 points in this game. I'm back in Detroit, not even close. And then Sunday Night Football, Pittsburgh versus the Los Angeles Chargers. 2 guys I'm looking at before I talk about them. Aaron Rodgers throwing to the inline tight end spot and the running back spot. So Jalen Warren, we'll talk about that at top 10 rates. But Quentin Johnson, the Steelers defense, giving up 299.5 pass yards per game. Nearly 200 of those go to outside wide receivers. We saw it last week with Alec Pierce. We even talked about it a second ago. Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman. Those passes are going out wide because of the structure the Steelers defense provides or pushes towards. They're targeted out wide at one of the highest rates in the NFL. That's where Quentin Johnson primarily aligns and runs his routes from. And they're really not targeting the slot much. In 3 straight weeks, 3 straight weeks, the Pittsburgh Steelers have allowed the outside wide receiver to go for 85 plus yards. You got 2 back-to-back 115s and 85 from Christian Watson. And then whoever you want to say here, Higgins or Chase, both 96 plus. They really struggle against outside guys, multiple 100-yard receivers against the Minnesota Vikings. There hasn't really been a true dominant wide receiver that's lined up across from him that hasn't had a good game. JSN, Garrett Wilson, they're struggling out wide. And I love Quentin Johnson because he's the out wide guy. Jalen Warren is the other guy to look at. Again, Chargers defense holistically is good against the run, but they're still allowing almost 5 yards per carry. They're allowing almost a full running back touchdown a game. This Chargers defense is getting targeted out of the backfield at a top 10 rate. That, to me, is the most important thing because Rodgers loves to throw the ball there. That's where Jalen Warren obviously is running his routes from, and the Chargers are allowing targets there. But the most important thing here, I think, is the game logs against in terms of scrimmage yards for the Chargers. Because, again, you look at the Chargers defense holistically, like this is a solid unit, but 3 straight or 3 of the last 5. 3 of the last 5 running backs have had 100-plus yard games on the ground. Through scrimmage yards. Bill Krosky-Merritt, 111 and 39 receiving. Devon Achane, 128 and then 22 receiving. Jonathan Taylor, 94, 3 touchdowns and 38 receiving. These running backs, even Cam Skadaboo had 90. J.K. Dobbins had 83 total. There's a lot of production to be had for these running backs against this defense. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like. There will be a Monday Night Football breakdown out for you Saturday afternoon. God bless you guys.